friends, my name is Luisa and this is Lulu Blue Studio. In this video I'm gonna give you 5 tips on how to paint flowers in watercolor. These tips can be useful for beginners or also for people that already started their watercolor journey. Are you ready? Let's start! The first tip that I would like to give to anyone starting their watercolor journey, or even for people that are already onto this journey since a few months or weeks, is actually to use and invest into good quality supplies. With good quality supplies, I mean to use good quality paper and good brushes in particular. Good quality paper, I would feel to recommend everyone to use 100% cotton paper, and I personally use paper that is cold pressed. That means that the surface of the paper is a bit rough, is not completely smooth, because this allows the paper to absorb the water and the painting and to leave our color in the area where we put the painting. There are different brands that are providing artists with good quality paper, 100% cotton and cold pressed. I personally use paper from the brand Arches, which is this sort of paper, but there are many other brands out there, and this sort of paper can be quite expensive, but I feel the best results can actually be achieved with 100% cotton paper. The paper you can buy can be also hot pressed instead of cold press. That means that the surface of the paper is much smoother, and this allows the water and the pigment to actually travel, let's say, a bit more onto the paper, so it doesn't sit on the paper in the same way as it does with cold press paper. This is up to the artist, what artists prefer to do. I personally prefer to use cold press paper, but maybe you can give it a try. But I definitely recommend anyone to start with good quality paper that is 100% cotton. Together with the paper, I would recommend anyone to use good brushes. I personally started my watercolor journey with brushes from the Princeton brand. I bought 2 brushes in size 6 and size 12, the series Heritage 4050. Actually, these are the 2 of the brushes that I use most often, and they are round brushes, so with a fine point and with a round belly that can be used for both very thin strokes but also quite thick. There are other brushes in the market that are very fun to use, like for example the filbert brush. I personally like to use the filbert brush as well, and many other shapes as well. It's up to the artist to decide which brushes to use, considering the technique and considering which shapes the artist wants to achieve. But definitely I would recommend the artist to invest into good brushes as well. The second tip that I would give to anyone who is starting the watercolor journey, and also to people that are already onto this journey since a few weeks, is to think about the colors for their composition before starting to paint. This would allow you to think beforehand how to have the colors on the paper, and also to balance actually your composition well onto the paper. You can take inspiration from the nature around you, from the design of the apartment or in the studio where you are painting, or even from the clothes you're wearing, or what the fashion designers out there are suggesting. You can check on Instagram what are the color of the year or of the month, and some of the colors that most of the people or the fashion designers, for example, like to push for the quarter or for the year, for example. And thinking about these colors beforehand would allow you to even think about the shapes that you want to create and give a sense to the composition that you are going to create onto the paper. The third tip that I would feel like giving is to create a balanced composition. So when you are going to plan a flower composition, it would be ideal if before starting to paint, once you have decided which colors you want to use, you can already see on the paper how you want your shape of the composition to be. This means that it can be a central composition with flowers in the central part, for example, of a vase, or maybe it can be a composition where the flowers are following an S shape onto the paper and the eye of the observer is led into following this S shape. The shapes can be of different types, and you can think about it depending on what you want to create and which message, for example, you want to give with your painting. But if you organize and you plan beforehand how the composition is going to be structured onto your paper, it's going to be easy for you also to put onto the paper all your ideas and your flower composition. The fourth tip that I would like to give is about reference. So what I mean is to look at a reference for inspiration. Looking at reference from big artists or other watercolor artists that are painting nowadays, or even looking at compositions from other artists that are not painting in watercolor but can still paint, for example, in acrylic or oil, can give you a great inspiration for your next painting. Even if you don't want to copy exactly what these artists are doing, that's totally fine. Actually copying, I think, is still a good process in the way of learning, because you can learn by copying from others, but then you should be able to find your style and put onto paper your artistic view of maybe a similar object of some artists or painters from the past, but of course with your artistic style. But this said, I believe that looking at references from other artists out there can really help you to find your inspiration and to approach maybe and find different techniques that maybe you didn't know you could experiment and you could find very interesting to use. The fifth tip that I would like to give is actually to have fun. With this I mean that I would recommend anyone starting with watercolor, or even artists that are already painting in watercolor, to remember that watercolor can really help us to make feel better. This means that watercolor is a great resource to free our mind, to actually feel good, and this we never have to forget. So with my fifth tip, I just wanted to highlight how just painting for the fun of doing it, not because every painting needs to go on the Instagram, is actually fine. And this can give you ideas for the next painting that maybe is going to be your masterpiece, but just have fun. So, as I said, not all the paintings need to be your final masterpiece. Remember that watercolor is a journey, and we need to experience every day in order to experience the progress, and being able to see the progress day by day to achieve some of the best composition out there. It takes time, and sometimes we can feel that we are not going anywhere, but doesn't matter. What I would recommend everyone is to have fun and find even maybe 5 to 10 minutes per day to just sit at the table and use your watercolor palette, a bit of paper, your brushes, and just let yourself go, your ideas, your feelings, and see what all of this is about. So these are the 5 tips on how to paint a good watercolor painting that you can start to implement with your next painting already today or maybe tomorrow. And maybe you can resonate with some of them or with all of them. Let me know in the comments below. If you have other tips to recommend to me, also let me know in the comments below. I hope this was useful, and if you want, you can subscribe to this channel. It would really mean a lot to me. Thank you. See you next time.